Hello everyone and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is October 13, 2016. My regular guests join me, Dr. Nancy Snow and Michael Cucek. Thank you very much. We're also pleased to welcome Dr. Toshio Nagahisa. Dr. Nagahisa is the executive director of the PHP Institute and he received his Ph.D. at UCLA. Welcome.
Very nice to join you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Today we're going to talk about productivity in Japan, how Japan is going to deal with this really emerging problem they have about a declining population and the need to have workers in the workforce to support an expanding need for social services, for childcare, and also for declining health of elderly Japanese. Let's start with Dr. Nagahisa in how the Japanese government is attempting to deal with productivity and perhaps getting more out of the resources that they have already in place.
Our Japanese government started the argument at the Deliberation Council from this September. And now they are talking about the how to change the working condition for Japanese people. Mm-hmm. Then there are 2 points of view, I think. First one is that how to increase the productivity of our economy by changing the working style. And the second point is that how to make the people happier by the reform. Right. So I think there are 2 points in the discussion.
Okay. Some of that can be done through technology. Others can be done by spreading the work out, maybe letting people work from home.
Sure, that's right. Yeah. The first one is that in an enterprise, many enterprises, there are many people, many laborers who do not actually work. But some people really work so hard.
Right, put in a lot of hours.
Yeah, right, exactly. Long time work. Mm-hmm. But in other part of the industry, the people are short. The labor is short. So these companies need more labor. But here there are people who do not. Well, it's hard to say. Not important. They need to change, or they cannot perform their capability very well. Mm-hmm. So I think the government now have to do now is that they have to transfer the laborers to these sectors, for example. Mm-hmm. So in other words, right person or right people in the right place. So we have to do that kind of thing in the entire society, not in the one enterprise. Mm-hmm. So this is one point, I think.
Right. Well, it's kind of hard to have the government guide industry in that way. Sometimes the government is rather unskillful in imparting that to Japanese business.
Right.
Michael, do you have a view on that?
Well, I think that the fundamental issue has always been the misuse of human resources in Japan. Mm-hmm. That indeed we have no mechanism that takes people out of jobs where they're doing very little and being paid a regular salary for it, and effectively moving them to some place where their skills, their knowledge can be used by another company. We have these divisions between companies and this idea of a permanent position within that company that lasts until retirement that makes it impossible to use Japan's labor force in a very effective way, allowing the flow from places where it's being wasted to where it can be used. That the government is trying to handle and trying to get some kind of idea. But whenever they do that, what happens is they run up against the interests of labor unions and the interests of the individual worker, which is they like to have a guaranteed position. They don't want to have companies to have the ability to fire and hire people automatically. They like the things the way they are. Now, that's a small fraction of the total workforce. Only about 25% of Japanese workers and their families can be put in this salaryman category. Right. The other 75% are outside of it. And we have this disproportionality where we have part-time workers or persons who are not a part of the management career track, and they're not protected by these laws, but this little slice really likes these laws a lot, and they have a tremendous say.
Right.
I was once part of this little slice. I worked for the U.S. federal government, the largest labor union in the United States. And when I got hired into this prestigious fast track at the U.S. Information Agency, I was told that I would be able to keep that job for the rest of my life. So when I was asking people at the agency, what is our mission? What am I here for? They were sort of saying, why do you worry your head about that? Because you're vested, you're in now. You just have to keep showing up. And I think that there is an analogy here that Michael is describing. It didn't appeal to me because I wanted some more action, and so much of the work we were doing was subcontracted. So I didn't even get to see the grantees and the Fulbright program. But when you are accepted into that special category, it's very hard to give that up. But what he's describing is 3 out of 4 do not have that sense of security. And I think the government needs to explain, as part of this 100 million sort of shiny, happy people policy, that we're all working together for a greater good. So productivity has to become more personalized. What am I going to get out of this? Rather than the feeling of those 3 out of 4 that, hey, how come he has it great and I don't? There's a sense of kind of an in-group versus out-group within some of these companies and within the Japanese society.
Right. This has kind of become cemented in culture, too, in the Japanese business culture.
Well, what is a culture?
Right.
This is the question. I think the culture is sort of a result of rational actions in the previous period, for example.
Right.
And let's say like 20 or 30 years ago, we are in a massive production and massive consumption.
Right.
Then people started their work at the very early morning, for example, and up until the evening, 6 o'clock. And if they produce a lot, the more they produce, the more they can sell. We had a kind of situation. That's why our value, for example, the diligent means work longer. We still keep it. Maybe this is a culture.
Yeah.
Although we have in a different conditions. So people now the workers in the any enterprises probably being longer in the office means you are diligent.
Right.
You're supposed to be diligent, so you stay longer in the office. But it's inefficient.
Well, that's kind of how it's always been. Not always. I mean, since the bubble era,
Exactly.
right? That even for professors, the associate professors wouldn't leave until the professor left, and the graduate students wouldn't leave until the associate professor left. And the same thing was transferred into companies as well. You wouldn't leave until the bucho left, and if the bucho is a real workaholic, you're going to be working hard too.
Right. And I think younger people now think that, we have this boss, that's why we cannot get promoted. So they have many complaints.
Right.
And senior people also feel that, I have I am so secured, but no chance to work. I mean, there's no job there. So,
No mobility.
it's not happy for both of them, not happy. So therefore, we have to change this system or culture. So we have to change the mindset.
Is there a generational difference in the sense that young people whom I
Like
deal
millennials,
with,
right?
Right, the millennials may not want to be staying so long.
They don't want to be
like that. A lot of the
dad.
young women I talk to are thinking about the pressure that they're under to marry by a certain age and to start a family, and then to try to balance that with going back into the workplace or maybe doing a part-time job once their children are in school. I don't think they want that model of the salaryman so much. So with all these women's conferences going on now in Japan, they've really got to address that, because they tend to exalt these super women achievers, and a lot of the women in the audience, I don't think, can identify with that.
When we bring up this idea of young women and trying to fit them in, I think it's appropriate to discuss the Dentsu case, don't you think? Which was just adjudicated by the Amida Board of Labor.
To fall into the category of, yes, death by overwork.
Well, in this
Karoshi.
case, where a young woman took her own life, and she was a new employee of Dentsu, and she was, first of all, not encouraged, basically coerced
right.
into overworking herself. She lived in the company dormitories, so she had no outside life and no outside contacts in order to make some kind of decision based on reality, on work-life balance, and her life went out of balance.
Right.
And so, I think it's appropriate that we discuss that aspect of karoshi.
Well, that's not a unique situation. I mean, for a new employee to go into a huge company like Dentsu, 8,000 employees, to live in a dormitory is somewhat standard.
Well, it's
right?
usual. Well, it's not a rare case. I mean, the seniors teach how to work in the company. That is a usual procedure.
Right.
So, but it's also true that when newcomers feel scared.
Sure.
So they don't know how to work. So and they feel some strong pressure from the people surrounding her, she or her, him or her. So I don't know. In this case, who has a responsibility? I don't know. Maybe she has a responsibility. Also, the company has a responsibility. I don't know what we have to do. But question is that we do not have, the Japanese company do not have the contracts with the workers. So we have just a membership in the enterprise, so that we do not know how they have to work. I mean, there's no job description in Japan. So this is the problem in the bottom of this case.
Right. Well, also the universities don't quite prepare people to enter into the workforce either. I mean, their first 3 years in a company, they're really getting trained by their senpai, by the people who are 2 or 3 or maybe 5 years longer in the company to do the work. And this is how you're supposed to act. This is how you're supposed to dress. This is how you're supposed to present yourself.
That's true.
Because people really don't know.
But you have to say that the corporate culture, at least as it's been inherited, there are aspects of it that were drawn from the fact that so many of the corporate warriors were indeed warriors, that there are habits that were ingrained into the Japanese people during the time of military dictatorship from up until 1945. And when all these persons who were trained came back into the workforce and they became managers, they took habits and ideas and thoughts about how to toughen up people, how to make them work together as teams, how to work hard, that are directly drawn from military training.
Right.
And that is not necessarily the best way to motivate people, we now know, but at that time it made sense. But it's a legacy that's just been passed on generation to generation inside the companies.
Well, isn't Dentsu really notorious in that area about really beating down employees and training them and really being regimented about how they treat their employees and bringing them up to speed?
Well, it's certainly true that Dentsu does not have what is most important, which is competition. If there was another major, yes, there's Hakuhodo. But Hakuhodo and Dentsu are not comparable in terms of size. They're not, and once you get past Hakuhodo, the other parts of the advertising promotion business are really tiny.
Dentsu is the largest PR firm in the world.
It's so dominant that its habits don't have to change. They don't have to care. If they had competitors, they would have to change.
I met with 2 young women this week. I won't say, they graduated from one of the top universities in Tokyo. And one has been hired by Dentsu and another by Mitsubishi. And the first thing in our conversation that they started out with was work-life balance. They were very excited about having been chosen, this entering class. This was like graduate school in the workplace for them. But they were also pointing out all of these sort of hierarchical procedures that they have to learn about entering and exiting the elevator, where to sit around the table, not to speak because you're at the lowest level, how to bow, exactly, how to exchange your business cards. And I thought, wow, no wonder there's a lot of stress beneath the surface. And going back to the woman who committed suicide. We didn't really know about this until this was brought to light and made an issue of Karoshi. So this happened December 25th, 2015. Nobody knew that at the time. And you wonder how prevalent it may be. Is this recorded as part of government statistics? But also, did she have anyone to talk to? Because it sounds like she was very cloistered.
Right.
At the same time, I agree with you. There's a personal responsibility and institutional need to address the need for change there. I hope that Dentsu will learn from this, because without that competition, doing things as they've always done, that creates inertia, and that's what Japan's trying to get away from.
Right.
And I'm using my hands again.
But perhaps the doctor would be able to make some comment about what the Abe administration is looking at doing.
Well, yes, and it's also ironic that this was a young female employee when we're trying to engage the women in the workforce and encouraging them to be more participant.
Yeah, the government is now trying to make a condition that women can work more easily. I mean, they want to make a mobility of the women's work conditions. I mean, if you once you enter some enterprise, and if you have a married, probably she can reduce the working hour. Then, if she got some pregnant, then shortly she retire from the work, but then come back soon if she likes. So the government tried to make us this kind of situation. Of course, we have now already, but more easily they want to make such a situation more better situation for them. I mean, for women.
Family friendly.
Family, yeah. So,
Will this be through regulation, through tax relief? What are the
regulation and also a taxation. Yeah, they want to change that kind of. They want to make such kind of reforms. Tax system too.
Well, in this case, do you mean? Well, they've abandoned officially this week. They abandoned the attempt to reform the tax system, allowing for the haigusha konjo, the having to do with the 1.3 million yen limit for married women who want to work part-time. They get a special particular deal tax-wise that allows them to be on their husband's pension and health care plans, where they're only working up to 1.3 million yen per year. And that was supposed to be a big reform. This was going to be abandoned. We're going to have equality.
Because that was kind of actually a disincentive.
It's an extreme disincentive for women returning to the workforce in full-time positions. And that's going to affect productivity because women's voices will be smaller. You don't listen to a part-timer. You don't ask a part-timer what she thinks. You know, permanent employees make the decisions, part-timers obey.
Well, I think people who come to Japan and observe how people actually work are always impressed by the real work ethic that's practiced within Japanese companies. And we all live here, we operate in Japan, and we also are kind of forced to live under that standard as well. We work hard, we work long hours.
Now, wait a minute.
Okay, well, Dr. Snow, you lead a leisurely life, traveling throughout Japan and teaching budding young minds.
No, I agree with you that the work ethic culture is very impressive. I think the worrisome part is that my first visit to Japan, I remember reading a book called The Straitjacket Society about a former government, pretty high-level fellow. You've never heard of this?
Yes. Yeah.
But there's a work ethic, and there's also a sense of, I have to do this. I can't step outside the box. I can't paint outside the lines here. So this is why with this sort of flexi work schedule or family-friendly work schedule, you have to have the top companies adhering to that and getting a big bonus from it. Don't you agree?
Yes.
Well, I think the people living in Japan have the experience that go to a good school and go to the good companies after that, whatever you want to do. So no idea how to work.
Right.
So simply you're belonging to some big, safe enterprise, the most important thing. then the situation, when the situation is changing, they cannot adopt that kind of change of the situation. So this is the biggest problem for Japanese workers.
Isn't Dentsu one of the top-ranked targets for Japanese graduates?
Oh, enterprises, you mean?
Yes, to join.
To join, Dentsu is one of them.
Yes.
One of those tracks.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there is also the fundamental issue that Japan's population is shrinking. So it needs to get more out of the workers it has.
Right.
Otherwise, the only other alternative is immigration, and we know that's not on the table. So how do you use Japan's workforce more effectively? Yes, it's wonderful the level of service that it now exists. It's wonderful the level of dedication, but there's no way that that can be maintained. The workforce is shrinking. It has had a temporary breaking effect by bringing in so many women. More than 1 million women have joined the workforce since Mr. Abe became prime minister, and that has had some ameliorating effect on what is otherwise a declining workforce. And Japan needs to keep functioning, and there are not enough workers. So either you work more or you work smarter.
Right.
And working more is not on the table. So how do you work smarter?
Right.
I think in some sectors, agriculture, immigration is on the table, at least part-time or temporary migrant workers. So it's not that it's totally off the table.
Yeah.
Work-life balance and enhanced productivity is providing a challenge to the Japanese government. They're focusing on that now. We're going to continue to watch that and report to you as it unfolds.